The Valley Current.
Yeah, hi, Jack.
Hey, you're looking good and you're sounding good.
You're at 6 o'clock in the morning, aren't you?
Yeah, I get up pretty early though because we head out on bikes at about 7.
Oh, wow.
And then we go through this big park. It's actually quite lovely. There's a ginormous, I guess it's a county park. It turns out there's a lot of county parks, and there's no one in it, so you can ride a bike.
Yeah,
It's got a very nice set of roads, and it's like the birding capital of the world here. There's this sort of an Audubon society, and there's a few people that are there with their cameras.
Yeah.
I guess there's probably 1,000 different species of birds in that park. That number may be a bit high, but
yeah.
But what I'm told is going on in your neck of the woods is it's really hot. Is that right? Someone just told me they came back and said it's really hot in England right now.
Yeah, it's going up and down. We've had a cool spell in the last 4 or 5 days, and it ended in a torrential downpour. It was almost like a monsoon, and the drains filled up and the garden flooded a bit. And we're about to go into another hot spell in the next few days. So, yeah, everyone's affected by climate change. Yeah.
It's happening. There's just no question about it. And I don't know. It seems like Trump is oblivious to it, and he doesn't really care. He doesn't plan to be around that long. So he sort of thinks, so what? And there's a bunch of litigation going on because California has imposed a rule that there will not be gas cars in California. And there's a lawsuit pending by the federal government against California saying you can't do that. We control what happens nationwide. And it's going to be an interesting question because usually this Supreme Court has been very much in favor of states controlling their destinies. Of course, the states are attached to an interstate highway system that the federal government funds. And so, you can imagine that if there are fewer gas stations in California, someone will say, well, we're going to force this change. Electric vehicles are a lot more expensive, although I guess the Chinese have really lowered some of the pricing for electric vehicles.
No, this BWD or whatever they call it is a fraction of the price of a Tesla.
So you just came out with a new blog. Did I read that correctly, or is that one that's been out for a while?
Which one?
Well, the one that I read recently that I made some comments about. I'm trying to remember the.
No, it's the same blog. I mean, what I do this year is I do the actual check, the real check on the model with real data to show how the model's performing. And I've done the 3 drivers, I've done the economic consequences, and did the political consequences. I got the social to come up, and then I'm going to round it all up in December with a paper on the model. But the model is actually working. I mean, I'm not saying that in any sense of false modesty or anything like that, but it really is. It's doing what it should do, which is predicting trends, which at this stage is all it can do.
Yeah.
But if you've been an investor or doing things, spending money or whatever in 2020, and you'd followed the model, you would have had a real heads up on inflation and economic growth, but also in the way in which things have gone in the United States, even though the model is global. This gradual move towards autocracy, which is the autocratization element of the model, this is what it was telling, and it is checking out really good. The funny thing is, Jack, in a world which isn't full up, where there's loads of different entities doing their own thing, it's impossible to predict. It's sort of random. But when we're all so tightly knitted together, the degrees of freedom are pretty small. And if you then accept the premise that there are 5 power blocks controlling things, and that planetary constraints that history is now changed. I mean, I made a big point about this in the blog before last, the one about don't get tied up in the weeds, where I said, look, think of it like this. Until the last, we can say 20 years, last 20 years ago, history was defined by human beings, Homo sapiens. History today is being defined by Homo sapiens with a load on their shoulder, which is called the planetary constraints. Trump likes to deny it's not there, but it's absolutely there. And that's going to influence all the decisions that we take. And we're only five, from my perspective, we're only 5 years into this. And already, as I'm showing, planetary constraints are beginning to have some impact. And one of the impacts, obviously, is on the global economic conditions. That's called full-up decline. And full-up decline is a combination of low to no growth. Think about that in all the policy and manifestos you see where they're advocating economic growth. So low to no growth and rising inflation. When you put those two together, you get something which is called stagflation. Mm-hmm. And what stagflation means is that the value of your assets declines. Now, I know it's that comes round to I don't know if I've just sent you a new copy of that note, by the way, to accompany this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use that one rather than the other one, and because I made some mods to it. But in the prelude to that note, as I say, I'm very reluctant to talk the subject we're about to talk about. I'm very, very reluctant to discuss because it's certainly not popular. Full-up economic decline wasn't popular. But to say that actually, whichever model you turn to, we move into a form of autocracy, or a form where the state takes more control. Most of my readership is from liberal democratic countries, and we're actually telling them the days of liberal democracy are gone. And I wish it wasn't true, but it is. But that doesn't mean that we're moving into the sort of hellhole that Trump is creating, or that exists, of course, in, North Korea, that is about to send 30,000 more of its citizens to be slaughtered in Ukraine. Autocracy doesn't have to mean that. And so I've coined the term the good autocracy.
See that. And years ago, I remember many people predicting that maybe technology would bring about a good technocracy. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Right? Techno-based autocracy.
Yeah.
Where the computing power would do simulations and make predictions and make suggestions and recommendations, and that was all part of kind of a bigger picture where delegation to this higher power of computing. I think there are people that still believe that the certain collection of tech bros will actually be the people in charge, directly or indirectly, whether you call it Elon Musk or Bezos or someone else, right? Like a collection of very smart people running these ginormous technology companies effectively will be in control and behind the political characters. Some people suggest that. I don't know that Elon Musk is really behind Donald Trump anymore. They seem to be at odds with each other, but obviously he was aligned at one point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go back to the blog before last, the one which is called Don't Get Bogged Down in the Weeds or something like that, I talk about this because at the moment, the only constraint I can see on us is planetary. But and I listened to Peter Schwartz talking the other day, the ex-CEO at Google, is it? He was pretty scary. And the big but is this: there is a thing called super AGI, artificial general intelligence, and that's been something which people have been predicting for some time. That's when actually the computers can talk to one another and they can code one another and they become smarter than us. even though when I talked about the segmented world model, I'm looking beyond what is happening right now. I'm certainly not looking that far ahead as Swartz and Kurzweil and people like that think. I can't think that far ahead. However, I would say to you, book 5, which is called The Augmented Society, is precisely about that. But that's a fictional book that's going to be written in 2028, coming out in 2030. But I don't want to talk. There's no question at the moment of any of these tech bros, what they call themselves, having any political success. I mean, they just don't come from that world, and you can see the mess that Elon Musk has made of his life.
Well, he's certainly in the news daily, and he signaled recently that he's starting his own political party called the America Party.
Yeah.
And he firmly believes that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will arrive far sooner than we'll be ready for it. And he's gone into a big fight against OpenAI in litigation. Even though he's accomplished his goals of stopping OpenAI from converting from a nonprofit to a for-profit company, he's actually been successful. Many people thought the odds of that were very remote, but OpenAI has conceded that they're going to stay as a nonprofit that has a separate for-profit wing. Maybe there's hardly a difference there. But I mean,
I always see. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure. No, Elon Musk's point is always interesting because he also announced that the last thing he does is he's going to radically change politics in America, and the innuendo is before I leave for Mars.
Yeah. He's all over the show, I'm afraid, and that's what's the pity. I mean, there aren't many Bill Gateses around. I mean, Bezos is a bloody mess. Musk is. I like Warren Buffett. I think Warren Buffett says and does pragmatic things, but and Larry Fink at BlackRock, I always read what he reads. He's tied down. When you've got 15 trillion or something under cover in your books, you're concerned about the here and now. I mean, where I am on all this is that if you, and I'm afraid that your listeners or readers or my readers, you're going to have to assume some knowledge of what the full up stage is and what full up decline is. Happy to do separate podcasts on that, by the way, if that's something you'd like to do. But that is the context, that's the setting for what I'm going to say about governance. And the governance is very simple. If I've got a plot in that blog I mentioned, the one about the weeds, where I'm showing global government social support. That's a lovely phrase which includes education and health and social security payments. It puts it all together. And
the Germans have had that for a while, haven't they? Fundamentally.
Well, no, we all had it. We have the NHS, we have the education department. We're spending over of our GDP, we're spending well over more than a third on social support. And what I'm saying is that when you plot that out globally, which I tend to do, that's been rising, and it's staggering. It's rising through this late expanding stage. And the reason it's been rising is because of debt. It's all, at least the last 10 to 15 years, all those increases have been debt funded. And, the British government the British situation is no different to anybody else. Every time we give a huge increase to railway drivers, as we did recently, without any productivity improvements in exchange, we're borrowing that money, and that simply can't go on. So,
well, that's a U.S. situation as well. We have this big, beautiful bill, and of course, everyone that's looked at it said this is a disaster for the United States in terms of the amount of debt that we're taking on for future generations to somehow deal with. And I think the working assumption is almost that so much technology comes into play in the next 20 or so years, maybe less, that productivity gains will make all of it irrelevant. And I don't know if that can really play out in the way that some people are imagining, the optimists, I suppose, are imagining it versus the pessimists, right?
Yeah, and in the meantime, it sounds trivial compared with the US, but as a percentage of GDP, we're at 100% debt repayments on versus our GDP. So we're paying about 100 billion a year for debt repayments. Well, the education budget is only 80 billion. The defense budget is 45 billion. And so this is beginning to be a problem. But it isn't just a problem in the United States, in the UK. I've got very good friends in France and, of course, in Japan. And in Japan, it's 250% of GDP.
Is that right?
Yeah. Japan has always been a basket case in terms of this debt borrowing. As long as the economy continues to perform reasonably well, they can pay it. But what I'm saying is that we're heading into some very stormy waters, which is called full-up decline, as part of the full-up stage. And everyone is going to struggle. Economic growth isn't going to be there. Inflation is going to increase. And so inevitably you won't be able to balance the books. Debt or public debt, and private public debt is a horrendous number, about 300 trillion. Public debt, which we call sovereign debt, is $102 trillion. And of that, a third of that, by the way, is owed by the US. And what I'm saying is that someone has to get hold of this. And half of the big bill, whatever it is, the big beautiful bill, in a way is right. He's got to cut back on the welfare budgets. What is absolutely criminal is that he's doing tax cuts to the wealthy. And of course, so we can't use Trump as an example. He is totally dysfunctional in the way he thinks. What everybody has to do is everyone has to tighten their belt. I have to pay more tax, which I'm willing to do. But equally, this bill that's just gone through in the UK, where we were trying to save 5 billion. I mean, it's peanuts in the US states, but it's important to us. It was voted down by the Labour Party councillors. They're not MPs, they're councillors. They're, I think, useless individuals. Voted down. Because what Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is trying to do is to balance the books, is trying to make sure that we're not debt dependent. Now, to me, in a liberal democracy, we're all sort of used to that, and it's very difficult. People my age, all the way down to people in their 30s, 40s, they're used to living in a world where things are health and education, social support are available. They're used to a standard of living, and these things cannot continue. They simply won't. And the way in which the model works, if you read any of the narratives, the scenario charts in the model, you'll see actually all the outcomes are autocratic. The state has to take more and more control. But the difference.
So is China ahead of others in their thinking that this good autocracy is exactly what must be imposed on so many billions of people? Because I'll tell you, China, if you start thinking about things like this, the Chinese example is really interesting. And I'm particularly interested in a comment Tim Cook made last week. He said of Apple. He said, "We don't manufacture in China because it's cheap. It isn't." He said, "We manufacture there because the labor force is the best in the world." Now, what does that say? That says that what the Chinese government have done is not what Trump is doing, lining the pockets of the Politburo. No, what he's doing, he's educating the people. He's giving them opportunities. He's training them. He's looking after his people. Now, I'm extremely reluctant. Again, we can have another podcast. We can talk about China because there's a lot of chat going on here about China at the moment. I'm reluctant to bring that into the equation because there are negatives on that as well with China.
But the best example I know, and I was lucky to meet a very senior official from Singapore recently, is the Singapore government that since 1960 has been what I would call a good autocracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's supported by the people. 80% of them vote for single party government. Why? Because those people, I'll tell you what, when the Panama Papers came out, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every fucking nation in the world, including the PRC, by the way, there
Mm-hmm.
were officials there. Not a single Singapore individual was named.
Is that the only country? Is that the only country?
Very few, because there were quite a few Brits as well. So, I'm not singling out anyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lots of Americans. And what I'm saying is there is a mood within that country whereby let's support the government. The government are basically trying to do the right thing for us. And the reason when you look at the documents the government produces, it says, actually, our strength, our power, our wealth comes from our people who are meeting their potential. And when you meet your potential, you feel good. I mean, that's an important thing. You feel you're achieving something. And then they focus on the individual. However, they are a single state.
I wonder if Singaporeans, I've never looked at this question, but I wonder if they actually invent per capita in larger numbers, because you're making a point here about if you feel like you're well taken care of by the government, you express your human potential, or you're induced maybe to express your human potential in larger ways because things are just taken care of for you. And I know many people, by the way, who are fairly wealthy in the US who say, oh, where I want to move is Singapore because it's a really well-run place compared to other places in the world. Like, I don't think you see homeless people on the street in Singapore. I mean, you see homeless people on the street.
And one reason why that is because the wealthy pay quite high taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So your friend, I think, may not like the tax side of that.
Mm-hmm.
You see, that's the thing. We've all got to contribute. It isn't just lowering the living, it isn't just keeping living standards for the poor at a certain level so the welfare payments don't go up. We have to pay in our taxes. And this is, in a way, the Scandinavian model as well. Try and get that sort of balance correct. But things are going to get extremely tough from now on. I mean, they are already tough because no one's going to probably default on the debt yet, but people are just going to have to, they're going to have IMF interventions and things like that over the next 5 years, I'm quite sure. And so the need for the state to be given the ability to manage the economy correctly, albeit still focused on giving opportunity and to the individual. And I don't mean something you said I don't quite agree with, which is in Singapore, they don't look after them. They don't provide exceptional care. They look after them to a certain extent, but they give them the opportunity to flourish and thrive. Yeah, that's the whole focus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an element of that within the PRC as well. And that's why I said I'm on the fence on the PRC at the moment. But there are other elements, and they are a power block, whereas Singapore is a very small country. So that answers the first question: what is the good autocracy? A good autocracy is a single state where the focus of the single state is still on the individual. It still respects liberal democratic principles, which, if I remind anyone listening to this, these are the respect for the tolerance of diversity, respect for international law, and respect for the human rights. However, and the devil is always in the detail, when you look at those three tests in Singapore, there are caveats. So, for instance, they don't have unions. In the British disease is the unions. It's actually, we talk a lot about the exploitative bankers and that. The real disease is in the unions. We've had 3 examples of that recently. We had the head of the Unite Union, the head of the Teachers Union, both of them threatening the government with action unless they agree to their pay demands. Now, that sounds more like Putin to me than it does great solidarity of the working people crap, you know. So Singapore, as with Singapore, union representation is nothing wrong with that, but it goes to the government. Equally, employers' associations go to the government. There is only a single party. But the good autocracy does something after 5 years. It has an election, and another party can come up and make a proposal. And then they will get 5 years. And of course, the danger with that is that you vote in a Trump or something of that sort. Singapore doesn't need to do that because it's in a very good economic situation. They're very happy with what they've got. And that really comes round to the third point, which is how is all this going to happen that I'm predicting? And of course, that's a sort of, that is $64,000 question. If you look at the parliamentary democracy we have here, how could we possibly become a good autocracy, a single state? I mean, we have a House of Lords, we have benches in the House of Commons for the opposition, but the opposition is completely useless. The House of Lords are completely useless in this situation because all they're doing is speaking in order to gain power. There's no solidarity to go to the lead government and say, look, we're going to agree with you on these economic points for the sake of the country. They won't do that. So the question about how things come about, we have an example in the United States where it's coming about. It's actually happening now in the United States, what I'm talking about, right? A disruptor comes in, Trump won, and then a reconciler comes in, Biden. A disruptor comes in, Trump too. And then I'm quite sure a reconciler will come in.
Well, we'll know to some degree at what we call here the midterm elections, and whether they bring in far more Democrats. I mean, many people think that the Democratic Party is so broken that they can't even organize correctly to win a midterm election that they should win.
That's right. That's right. And Mamdani, or what his name is, in New York, is a gift to Donald Trump.
Yes, in many ways, exactly. Yeah, and he'll certainly take advantage of it. And he'll certainly take advantage of everything that plays out poorly in New York, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
You know, we have to hope that there is this yo-yoing disruptor, reconciler. If you might very well turn the question on me and say, well, what about the United Kingdom, for instance? How's that going to flip? I don't know. What I do know is one very interesting fact. 65% of OECD countries are coalitions. Yeah. So one of the ways you do this is you form coalitions. Now, let's take the United States as an example. When the Walmart put up their prices pretty soon, when the market wakes up to the fact that the fiscal situation for United States is very bad, and begin to do something about whether giving less support to long-term treasuries and things like that. And thirdly, when the people actually get onto the street, because at the moment the trouble with the United States, like all democracies, only about 50% of the people actually vote. What you guarantee with what Trump is doing is 100% of them are affected. Now, many of them think Paul Krugman's running this thing about equality at the moment on his blog, which is brilliant. And Krugman says, don't worry about the 0.1%. I mean, we are all concerned about the 0.1%. The 1%, the 1% wealthy in the United States. What about the 0.1% who carry immense power? And what that actually means to me is there are 99% of people who are disempowered by what Trump is doing. So the power of the people on the streets, it's going to be the market, it's going to be the voting in the midterms, and it's going to be the people on the streets who are going to bring about change, and the change, as I say, we've tried this already in the UK in 2010 after the financial crisis. We had a coalition of amazingly, of the Tory and Liberal governments. It was not particularly good. But I would think one of the ways in which it transitions and moves in the United States is, for the first time in US history, some sort of coalition may occur, or people jumping across the aisle in the House of Commons. But the Cheney types will be sick to death of what they're seeing, how people are being impoverished, and they'll see the riots, they'll see the market penalizing us, and that may create a new central coalition in the United States.
One way to think about this coalition, and it just dawned on me, and it does play into how the Supreme Court views the role of the states, is you could argue, so we do have a national government, and it's very impactful across the United States and even beyond the United States for sure. And it is centralized in a place called the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., which is just a very small plot of land that's bound up by Maryland and Virginia and so on. And most people live in those other states, the surrounding states. Of course, many bureaucrats live in apartment buildings close by their offices when their offices are open, which they have reopened post-COVID. But then the states, the 50 states, really have separate governments and separate governance. And many states are very liberal, like California, for example, is a very liberal state because it has some big liberal cities that occupy most of the population. And this balance of you can have an autocracy in Washington, D.C., but it's not really going to impact us here because we govern differently. It's a point I'm making about California passing legislation saying we're just not going to have cars with gas in them or any form of fuel other than electric or some sort of non-polluting hydrogen or something that's not a fossil fuel, period, full stop. It's not going to be allowed in the state. You're going to be stopped at the border kind of thinking and say your car is just too polluting, park it here and you can rent a car, you can rent an electric car or something like that by 2035 or whatever date they've set. And the U.S. government has gone to war against California more symbolically, in my way of thinking, than really with the view of impacting this rule, because they effectively are saying you're changing the power dynamics. And this Supreme Court has leaned in the direction of let's let the states make their decision on abortion or on anything else, even probably soon. They'll even probably say, well, we're actually going to make a rule about whether or not same-sex couples can be married. Maybe some states don't want to do that, and we'll just let states, even though it's a recent pronouncement constitutionally by the same court, like within the last 10 or so years, that, hey, we're going to allow same-sex couples to marry. Maybe they'll reverse that. They reverse the abortion rule, saying, we had a national rule that women should be allowed to get abortions, and they just said, you know what, that's just wrong thinking. We're going to reverse it. And they went through in a footnote that's a very lengthy footnote saying we reversed decisions before when we thought they were wrong constitutionally. We'll do it again. And they listed lots of cases, obviously there were many where people look back and say, yeah, that was an incorrect rule. And they tend to be rules that are much more conservative, like the internment of the Japanese probably would get reversed if it ever came up again. It would be viewed as constitutionally defective. But, I think there is in the U.S. this view that the 50 states can sort of void a bad autocracy. And maybe the question is, can the 50 states support a good autocracy? Because historically, we don't seem to be able to get into a coalition that people can express as, yes, maybe we do need, given the full opposition, a good autocracy, because without it, we won't be able to get around all the things that are headed our way that constrain human behavior, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting monologue, Jack. You raised a point of view which I don't share with you, but as you're there, I have to think very hard about, and that is that the Supreme Council is somehow guided by the Constitution and by legal argument.
Yes. That's what we teach our law students, at least. Yes, that's right.
I mean, imagine me saying that 10 years ago. You'd say, don't be a fucking idiot. Of course they are. But the idea that somehow the states rule, the state rather than the federal government rules supreme, I don't believe that that's what guides them. They will change that if Trump indicates that that's what he wants.
Mm.
That's the nature, and Trump is very weak if he can't do that, because he's got 3 people on that Supreme Court, and somehow he manages to swing it time and time again. So I'm not so confident about, and that's his big card that he's got in his hand. That he managed to, after Trump won, he managed to get the Supreme Court leaning in his direction. But going back to your point about, okay, we're all right because we're California, I have I mean, this is maybe going off track a little bit, but it does actually address the issue of, can you, if once you're into the disruptive phase, can you get out of that and have another reconciler? My friends in Los Angeles are very frightened by these ICE stormtroopers, as they call them,
right,
and what they're actually doing. And I read some time ago, actually, I read Project 2025, and I was absolutely stunned that it's almost like a plan which is laid out for who will go into all these positions to replace them. And one of those issues is to build an army, and not that bunch of ragbag idiots that stormed the Capitol building, but something more organized. And what I'm concerned about, under the guise of detaining illegal immigrants, he's building up a military group, which is exactly what, I'm sorry to say, is exactly what Hitler did. He built up his brown shit. Oh, they were brown shits, weren't they? And you know, those began to terrorize neighborhoods, and they're well organized and they're well armed. So, one of the things, the final section I've got here is, and this is on the new. Please use the new text rather than the. So we talked about how it will come about. So what are the dangers? And the danger, of course, for all of us is that you get someone in power who's well-meaning, but turns out to then flip over. They rather like the power, or that you get stuck in the disruptive phase. They're so efficient that you never get out of that, and essentially, in both those cases, bad autocracies persist.
Well, let's assume that it heads in the direction of a good autocracy for a while. Is it inevitable that, in the nature of greed and other factors that play into corrupt politicians, there's a move towards a bad autocracy inevitably, because people just feel like they have so much control and hubris takes over when levels of control. You could argue that's what's happening with Trump these days, because there are opportunities that come up that he doesn't have any guardrails at all. A plane from Qatar, no problem. Why wouldn't I take it? I can't get what I want from Boeing. I can't seem to get the appropriations from the Congress to get the plane I want. I want a brand new Boeing plane. I can't seem to get it. I'll just take the gift from Qatar. I mean, literally, he sees no problem with that. He doesn't see the conflict of interest. He sees it as, hey, it's an asset. I'm not going to keep it personally. It's going to be given to the United States. We'll presumably treat it as part of the fleet. It's a gift from an ally. What's wrong with that? That's his attitude. Any other president you would poll, starting even from George Washington, would say, no, you can't do that. We have an actual constitutional provision that prevents you from taking that gift, regardless of how you're going to re-gift it.
Yeah, I mean, what that boils down to, and you've just raised a really particularly heinous thing that he's done, accepting that gift. It boils down to whether you think people are basically good or bad. on the balance. And on the balance, I'm absolutely of the belief that people are essentially good. And what I mean by that is that they don't just go after their own interests. They realize to achieve those, they've got to work with other people. And Trump is a freak. I mean, he's a total effing freak. And for the short period of time, he's pleasing his constituency. But as I wrote, there's a phrase I wrote which I was thought of developing. I don't know if you go in the back of the text. Trump is like a ship in the night that unfortunately collides with the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're stuck with him because he's damaged you so much. He's stuck there, and you can get rid of him because he's collided, but it takes a long time to get rid of the fellow, because he's taken measures, and obviously the Supreme Council is an example of that. The ICE Army, whether it's real or not, could be an example. So there's
the ICE Army will eventually be automated with robots. It, I think, already is automated with drones, and it will have some degree of automation to do the kinds of tracking that people fear, because it does happen very suddenly that they do come upon a group. And it has actually put the brakes on a lot of different families getting together at public parks because they feel like they're at greater risk in the context of a public park, right? Right.
And that was one of the reasons why I held back about the PRC, because whereas the PRC are certainly helping their people, they're also putting enormous and surveillance controls on the people as well. Mm-hmm. I have young friends there, that say that you can't do anything because now the face recognition, which even 3 or 4 years ago, face recognition was crap. I am now told it's no longer crap. It's really
great. I mean, look, you go through customs now in a breeze with this automated face recognition stuff, right?
They'd certainly pick out our two ugly mugs, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So, So the thing for me, going back to people are basically good, is that even though Trump sets a bad example in the way, for instance, he treats women, majority of people don't do that. And they won't do that. We won't become a nation. We won't become a Homo sapiens disgusting, We won't suddenly flip over in nature. The trouble is we won't do what we absolutely need to do. And if you look at the GCFI matrix that I make to show how we divide up the different outcomes, the vertical axis of that matrix is the degree of cooperation. Mm-hmm. I find people incredibly cooperative. As you become more and more powerful, of course, that changes. But you've got to make your argument. Go along with that. Scratch your back, I'll scratch yours. But that's how pragmatic cooperation goes. What people won't stand for long is a single individual lining his pockets and his friends in his pocket, and not taking a broader interest on the outskirts of those sycophants who are in the cabinet. Lots of people who are fearful. They're saying to themselves, "Jesus Christ, I really can't trust this guy." And the microsecond, I should say, that they have a chance to get rid of that because they're so distrusting of this man, they will leap on it. Mm. But he's got to keep his surveillance levels up in order to punish those that do that, of course.
There's a book I want to send to you. I'll send you the link. I just finished it, called Abundance, by Ethan Klein. He wrote the book about why are we so polarized a few years ago. He just finished a book called Abundance, and he makes the argument that a good autocracy makes sense when you really have to get things done. And there are situations when you really have to get things done. He's a big liberal Democrat, and he believes that the traditional party system makes a lot of sense, although now he's saying it's very dysfunctional. But he makes the example, and the thought just occurred to me when you talked about the the ship whacking into the bridge. We actually had that happen in Maryland. The ship
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
went
Yeah,
into a
was,
bridge.
yeah. That was the example when I saw that happen. It
They,
happened twice, actually. It happened
they,
twice.
yeah, they fixed it in 12 days because there
Yeah,
was essentially a governor of
yeah,
Pennsylvania who is
yeah,
actually a Democrat, and people think he should run for presidency. And he just said, "Look, I know there are EPA regulations. I know there are 1,000 other regulations.
yeah,
We're just going to do this without
yeah,
paying any attention to the regulations, because if we
yeah,
don't do it, we're going to destroy the economy of like
yeah.
probably half of the Eastern Seaboard based
Good.
on trucking and the like that goes over this bridge." And he
Yeah,
fixed this bridge like in 12 days. And he became like an autocrat, saying, "I'm the czar of getting this bridge done." And all the governors in the adjoining states said, "You are, go for it. We're not going to get anyone in the way. If there's litigation that follows, we're going to grant immunity. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And he did it like in record time. And the argument is, as you get, I think the argument in your terms, or in the terms we're discussing for the segmented world, as you get to this full up state, you do require leadership that
yeah,
can just take people by the collar and say, "There's no choice, man. We're running out of oxygen here. We've
yeah.
got to do this," right? It's just an inevitable part of leadership to take control when
But
people are debating, right?
there you have the rub in what you just said. You've got to find personalities that convince the people. Elon Musk doesn't do that. No one, and that's why the American Party will fail, because no one trusts him. But you've got to have, and what seems to happen, and I talked to my Singapore friend about this. What seems to happen is that they know the failings of their government because the government admits them, and they
Yes.
share them together. And the people are saying, "Well, it can be worse. It could be Donald Trump." Nowadays, they say, as a woman said, it could be Donald Trump. You should be
Right.
great. We should be grateful for what we have, And they have a good autocracy. And so, anyway, this is the unspoken part of the model that I just thought we'd do a little podcast.
I think it's brilliant, and I'm sure that the latest book that hopefully I'll get an advanced copy of to give you my 2 cents on, because I've read all your other books, and I highly recommend all of them, even though we may disagree about how you make the book cover appear or how you decide to do the particular titling of the books, because I do think the books are the best series that anyone that wants to study economics, world politics, and really futures thinking should buy your books and read all of them, and probably read them again a second time around to sort of get the big picture of what you've written, because you've written something that's driven off of a real economic model that you're using daily and that you used to use in your prior work daily, and that is proving out to be true. But I'm not sure, for example, it seems like Powell at the Fed would want to get a copy of your model and plug it into all the other models that they use to try to figure out what's going on in the world. And maybe at some point, someone will send them the series of books. Maybe I'll do that and say, you really need to read these before you leave office, and have some influence on the other federal governors reading them as well. And you'll get all the prizes that result from that.
But Jack, when you're talking about, I talk to industry and particularly insurance companies and things. Quite understandably, these are people that they say, show us the beef. What is it called?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I'm actually doing right now, this year, is showing you, here are the model predictions, and hey, this is the outcome over the last 5 years. Last 5 years, COVID, Ukraine war, surely you can't predict that. The world is a big place, and it's moving in an inevitable direction. And all the trends, the only trend I've got wrong, would you believe it, is not wrong, but I've underestimated how fast global warming is moving. I was so careful about that, and it's actually moving faster than any of my estimates, and that's super, super, super scary. But there are now, I've gone down to 20 representative parameters, and as I go through them, they're all giving that trend. So I do that because I understand I can't just wave my arms around and say, oh, David Nash's ideas. I've got to show something credible. And as you say, if you then if you go onto the website, you'll find that the economic, political, and social scenario that is being followed in the book, I've actually put it in there. It's included in there. So, and of course, I don't discuss that in the fictional novel because that would be too tiresome. Can I go back to a point? I would be absolutely honoured if you would read book 3.
Absolutely, we'll do. We'll give it priority. Send it. Absolutely, no question.
It's at the moment I'm working with is it called Gemini? Yeah, my Google AI.
Yes.
It's so wonderful, the AI. It says, look, I cannot copy edit. I'm not able to do a proper copy edit. I can't do context. And I love that honesty.
Yeah.
But actually what it does do is pick up my word blindness for the indefinite article. I've got a couple of word blind things. And so this is going on to today, tomorrow, Wednesday. By Wednesday night, I will have a copy of book 3 for you.
Okay.
And go to your second point. If you read carefully, and read carefully book 2, Difference of Opinions, it's called, because that gives you the picture of the front cover that we should be creating. I've got in my room. I can't show you. Yes, I could. I might be able to show you. I've got your.
Is this your little writing cottage, or are you in London now?
No, and this is my writing place. Here's your. Can you see it? I've got your.
Yeah, I see it.
Thing.
Yeah.
And what I need you to do is read. Particularly, I mean, read the whole book, please. But if you read 2, you'll see the work we've got to do together, and I want to do that together. To get that front cover right.
Yes. Yes.
Because actually, I think you're better at it than I am. But what we've got to do is we've got to create something there together. But if you anyway read 3. The thing about 3 is it's a page turner, and I knew I had to do that because 1 is a challenge. I personally think 1 is the best book of the series, but 2 gets you onto Philip's Key. But then the adventure really begins. So it's an adventure page turning, but it does one other thing. It gets you thinking about book 4 because the whole series is built around book 4, A Plan for Thriving. And so you begin to lower your feet into what is coming, and that book is going to come out in 28.
You're so capable of predicting your own productivity. I love that.
Yeah, but
I love that.
Well, I give us what I do. I mean, I'm probably like you. I know how old I am. I know I want to have I don't want a stressful life. So I give myself actually plenty of time to get it done. But Jack, I'd be honored if you read that.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, and I thank you for giving me an hour of your time now. I think the results are fantastic. And I do think if we track some of the stuff that's going on, we're going to see that your predictions are playing out almost exactly as you're saying them. So more and more, I hope that people start to see that you are actually doing stuff that many people don't do, even in paid positions, and you're doing it just as a regular unpaid individual author who's very productive out of your writing studio there. So congratulations on all your ability to get these books done, because so many people never finally finish whatever books they start. They start them and they never get them done. That's probably 90% of authors out there, right? Get stuck. But you really do produce, and the books are always great. So what's the title, or have you decided on the final title yet for it?
Yeah. The title, I did actually take a little bit of note what you said.
Okay, good.
I've added something else. It's still called Maine, the secret revealed. So
Oh, good, nice.
I took
that.
your point that you've got to, if you just say main, it doesn't say anything, but the
Right.
secret field, what secret?
Yes, I know.
So that was your influence.
You're setting up the page turner. That's good. I like that. That's
It is,
beautiful.
this one is, but book 4, I've got to find a very elegant and attractive way to outline this model that this hub commonwealth is adopting, which is based upon a lot of what Methuen done, but other people as well. So that's what's on the horizon. But at the moment, it's a matter of listening to people like yourself, what you think about the book, and continuing to do the blogs, because the blog is the important way to link what's happening here now with the segmented world model. And I need to carry on doing
David, I think you need to do what Francis is doing, but not about teaching writing. I think it's more about teaching how to think about world affairs. Francis Francis Wilson is doing this writing seminar in an outskirt of London. I forget where she's doing it.
Bruton,
I want to say
it's a hell of a long way away from London.
Do you know about the seminar she's doing in September?
Yeah. She's doing it in Bruton, isn't she? In Somerset.
Yeah, I think no. I thought it was closer to London, but
really?
I'll find the place and I'll send the pin to you, because I think she's brilliant, but she's really just about kind of fiction. Not that that's bad, but you combine fiction with reality in ways that are very attractive, in my opinion. And she could learn a lot from you. And of course, if you chose to take some of her classes, you probably would learn a lot from her. You do dialogue well. She says she doesn't do dialogue at all. She can learn how you do dialogue. And I'll probably suggest to her that she think about sitting into whatever class you might eventually do someday. But I'm convinced that if you did the kind of salon that she does in wherever that location is that she's doing it in September, is what I want to say in the back of my mind, the third week of September, that you should do something like that with a group of people that are potentially influential in bigger ways, whether they're in the United States or England or France or anywhere else. I'm convinced that kind of roundtable would produce some very interesting results and really have a lifelong legacy for you that's far bigger than even the 5 books that you will have finished by the date that you decide the series is over, because obviously the model will continue to operate, and there will presumably be someone or some group that will want to do something with it from a succession point of view, right?
Again,
Sooner or later.
Yeah, again, Jack, thanks to you. The Supra model, it's all sorted out. We had a little problem with some version of things.
Yes.
It's working great. And
it's working.
You go in and you can meet David Nash. You can ask anything.
There you go. There's the succession model right there in an AI, right?
Yeah, if I drop down dead tomorrow, it would have quite a lot. I mean, but if I carry on this for 3 or 4 more years, this is, I mean, you can ask about the love life of Methuen Price if you want.
Nice.
Or you can ask about what is a good autocracy. You can ask almost any question, and the more almost obtuse questions, the best, because it really tests the edges of the model. So Supra is there. The other thing that's going on is obviously this first 5-year reckoning of the model, which is going to result in a document in December, which is I'm quite sure it's going to come out as a validation of the segmented world approach. Remember, I'm not predicting the future. I'm giving you 4 possible outcomes, and you have to pick that. But it does give you a framework for you to think about things. So, like the good autocracy, the point about that is you have all this flood, particularly in the United States, this flood of information about politics. What in the fuck is going on? The good autocracy gives you a framework. You don't have to agree with it. You can find all sorts of issues, particularly when I say the devil's in the detail, you say, well, how is the different liberal democracies going to be, democratic principles going to be incorporated in a good autocracy? I'd say go and look at Singapore. But the point is, it's a starting point for people to be able to manage this absolute cascade of changes that are coming our way. The world we've entered the new era, and the model is there as saying, look, you could put all these things together, and you can see when you talk to me, I can answer a question on anything. I'm not saying it's right, because often I'll give you 4 answers, but at least it's a way of thinking about it, taking control, and actually not getting depressed. That people do. People getting very depressed and frustrated about the news, and that's particularly among intellectual people with good education, should we say? That's a pity, because it doesn't have to be like that.
So, David, how do people reach your Supra? Do they go to the Supra site? Because you have a link, right? I don't know if you changed the link to make it easier for people to get there.
Listen, I have not released it yet.
Oh, okay, so it's internal.
No, but I will send it to you.
Okay, I will play with it as I read the book. How's that? As I read the third book, I will play with it and tell you what I see as it unfolds.
Yeah, the third book will be put in this week. Will be put in for this week. So
good.
And in fact, little things like, for instance, the little note I've sent to you to do with good autocracy, that went in. That already has gone in. I'm going to replace it.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you're loading stuff as you go along. That's great.
And it sorts out the here and now with the future. It sorts out the fictional with the non-fictional. It understands that difference.
Nice. Beautiful.
So that's cool.
This has been much fun, and I look forward to seeing you in maybe a couple of months. We may be in England to visit with Francis Wilson, or maybe even attend that class. We'll see. We'll decide, but we'll definitely make it, and we'll definitely have lunch together.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you, obviously, in the new year.
Absolutely. Of course. We've got your room all selected and confirmed. Okay. Talk to you later.
Can you send us a picture?
Yeah, of course. We'll send pictures. Yes, we will. All right. Talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.